Today we're going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to show you the entire process, start to finish, of how I edit one of my YouTube videos. Now, since this is the entire process, the video is going to be rather long, and the audio on this is just going to be live. I'm not going to go back through and cut or edit anything on this video just because of the extreme length. So what you've seen so far during this process is me taking the raw clips from my camera, which is the Panasonic GH4 that I use to film most of my cell phone durability tests and my teardowns. And I'm going to take those clips and drop them onto my desktop. Now, I personally have two SSDs inside of my computer. Those are two different hard drives. I have my operating system and my program, which is Adobe Premier CC, on one, and then I have all of my footage and files on the other SSD so that the SSDs don't have to all be recording off of one hard drive. It distributes the load across both of them evenly, and you know, Adobe is supposed to run smoother that way. Anyway, so now that I have the files transferred from my SD card to my SSD or my hard drive, I'm going to take them and just drag them and drop them into Premiere. I imagine I've never used Final Cut Pro or any of the other professional editing softwares, so everything that I go off of today is just going to be strictly from Premiere. Now all the files are dropped into Premiere, and I can take them, and if I right click on any one of these files, I can create a new sequence. This means that it's going to set the format of Adobe Premiere to the exact same size and frame rate as the files that I shot with my camera. Normally I shoot in 4K at 30 frames per second, so that's just going to build the sequence or the format around that. One nice thing about Adobe Premiere is that I can adjust any of these windows and rearrange them how I want. So I'm going to take my timeline and drop that down into the bottom right hand corner, and that's where I usually keep all of my clips. That's also, you know, where the storyline is going to be in that bottom timeline. So if I double click on one of these little boxes in the bottom left hand corner, these are all the clips that I just dragged in, it's going to pull one of the clips into a source window, which just shows me what's inside of that clip. This is like the preview window of each individual clip that I can take and choose which portions of the clip I want before it goes into my actual program window, which is going to be more of the final copy. So the video that I'm going to be working on today is from the LG, and it's a pretty easy phone to take apart, mostly held together with screws, so I figured it would be a good video, a good simple video to use as part of this instructional how I edit my videos video. It's kind of like the inception of video editing here. The mic that I'm recording on is a Samson Meteor Mic. I'm going to talk about that more later in the video as I explain how I do my voiceovers. So what I'm doing right now is I have my first clip in my source monitor, and I'm choosing which parts of that clip are important. Obviously, I have about 25 minutes worth of footage with the LG G5, and most people don't want to sit down and watch a 25-minute video on how to fix it. So I take all of the important bits, which usually ends up being about 5 minutes, and condense it down into one short little video that more people are interested in watching. The most important hotkeys that I use during this program are the J, K, L, I, and period keys, and the O key. So they're all over there on your right hand side of the keyboard. So the J is like a reverse, the K is a stop, and the L is a forward. And I use those while navigating inside of the source monitor and program monitor and on the timeline, so I can choose which clip. And then the I sets an in point and the O sets an out point, and I can use the period to drop that down into my timeline. So it's important to use as many hotkeys as possible because that really does speed up your video editing. And I'll kind of mention a few of the other hotkeys that I use as I do this video editing video. So what I'm doing right now is I have a few little templates set up during when I set arrows and everything to my videos, because people don't want to watch me take out 20 different screws. They just want to see where the screws are at, and if they really want to pause the video, they can. I'm all about streamlining everything and make everything as simple as possible on my YouTube channel. Ain't nobody got time to watch super long videos. So I have this template set up for arrows. These arrows I got from a font. I think it's called Wingdings 3 or Webdings 3. You can see that on the right hand side of the screen there. If you want, you can make this video full screen, and it'll be a lot easier to tell what's going on, since there's a lot of little details all over the place. I had counted the screws on this phone during the teardown, and I'm just taking each of these little arrows and lining them up with the holes of where the screws came from. And this is important, obviously, for the viewers in the future who are going to repair this phone. I'm making this video showing how I edit my videos to kind of give back to the YouTube community. I'm not super, nervous about sharing all of my secrets online because, I really doubt there's many people interested in making cell phone repair videos on the level that I make them. But when I look back, as I started my YouTube career, videos like this helped me out a ton. I remember watching a few videos exactly like this one from Ben Brown and also from one of the editors over at Linus Tech Tips. They made the full walkthrough of how they edit their videos, and I learned a ton from that. So if I can help out and give back a little bit back to the community, I'm all about that. I will link both Ben Brown's video and the Linus Tech Tips video that I mentioned earlier down in the video description. And I will try to keep on top of the comments below this video as well, but I do get a lot of comments on my channel, so things are kind of falling behind at this point. I'm a one-man band as far as editing and comments and all of my other stuff goes, so it's hard to keep on top of all the little stuff. But either way, hopefully this helps. And if you have any tips for me, also leave those in the comments. I like how the comment section usually turns into like a community forum for people who are attempting the same projects. YouTube is a fantastic place for do-it-yourself projects. I will speed up some of the more boring parts of this video, like now that you've seen me organize quite a few arrows, we're going to skip on to the next part. Basically, I'm just, using my mouse to drag these little arrows around, and the font is the Wingdings or the Webdings 3. Now that that's done, I can drag that little title page over onto my timeline and line it up where, generally where I want it to be later in the video. Right now I'm just doing a really, really rough edit, taking the important bits that I want to use in my final video and laying them all out. I think I have about 30 minutes worth of raw footage. I'm taking my mouse and just kind of scrubbing through the initial timeline right there in my source monitor, because that gives me an idea of what's inside of the clip. Then I can just use those hotkeys again, the JKL to play, pause, and reverse or rewind, and the in and the out key, I and the O, and the period to drop it down to the timeline again. Now normally I have 4 computer monitors set up on my desk. So I have, the source monitor on another screen, so I have more room on my main monitor for the program monitor, which is kind of like the preview, and the timeline. Things spread out, it's just a little more organized for me. It's how my mind works. But since I'm doing the screen recording, I'm taking everything and putting it in one window. It's a little bit, tighter spaced, but you can make this video full screen if you want to see like little details and the words and everything that I'm using. So once again, still taking my mouse and just grabbing that little blue icon and scrubbing through the footage to see what I have to work with. Usually I edit my videos right after I do the teardown, so it's fresh in my mind, and I kind of have a general idea of what I want to say during the teardown video. So at this point you can see me trying to remove the back. Obviously people don't want to watch the many failed attempts at me opening a phone, and usually I'm one of the first people on the planet to ever open up one of these devices, so there's not often that I get to watch someone else do it first. Sometimes on YouTube there is people who get to the phone before I do, especially if it's one like the LG G5 and I have other phones that I'm working on in the meantime. So I will use other videos to watch and get tips on how to remove them. And I've talked to iFixit and a couple of the other guys. We have a pretty tight-knit community as far as cell phone repair goes, and they all do the same thing. If I get a video out before iFixit, they watch mine. If they get a video out before me, I watch theirs. It's just, a community. We're all friends. And we're all trying to accomplish the same thing, which is to help people repair their devices. And that's how communities work. I chose the LG V20 to make this video on because it's so simple and easy, and you can get a basic idea of how I edit my videos. Usually the timeline is much more complex than this, especially if I'm working on an iPhone or a Samsung phone, which has a lot more screws, and there's a whole different process using like a heat gun to separate that back glass panel from the phone. So luckily the LG V20 came out, and I'm able to use that phone, the simple phone, to make this video with. So for this clip, I finally figured out how to remove the back and pop off these 2 top pieces and bottom pieces. And so I realized that that's the important part of the clip that I need in my source monitor. So I'll hit the I key and the O key to do the in and the out points, and that marks it on the source monitor timeline that you can see there. and then I do the period to drop it down into my timeline. You can also take your mouse and grab, see in the center part of the source monitor, you can grab just the video or just the audio from that clip and drag those and drop those down into your timeline as well. So still just watching from my source monitor, finding the important bits, and we're just going to do, a rough cut and drop those all down into my timeline. It's a pretty monotonous process. I've made over 400 videos now on my YouTube channel. So I do, phones, once you've been inside one, you've been inside pretty much all of them. They're all relatively similar. Just a few minor variances here and there with each new model. Anyway, so I finished all of those clips on my first little tiny clip down there in the bottom left where I, keep everything organized. It's like my little library. The camera that I use, the Panasonic GH4, only lets you record in 4 GB files. So, a video like this, where it's 16 gigabytes, there's quite a few files. And plus, I'll stop and start the camera a couple times during the video, to answer a text, or just because I'm bored, or if I need to, see something up close or research something, I'll stop and I'll have a few extra clips to work with. So when I finish one clip, I'll double click on the other one, which opens it up in my source monitor, and then I can do the same thing. Scrub with my mouse, find the important parts, and use the I, the O, the JK, and the L to navigate. You can use your mouse because you can see all of those keys down there at the bottom of the source monitor, the stop, the play, and you can use those. The only problem is when you're using your mouse a whole lot, you're slowing down and you're wasting time because, transferring your hand from your mouse to your keyboard or clicking on things just, takes longer, and you want to streamline the edits as much as possible, especially with YouTube when you're trying to create content daily, like a vlogger or any type of content like that. It's just the least amount of time you can spend in front of a computer, the better. Honestly, editing video is the worst part of being a YouTuber. It's so time consuming, and it's just not the most fun. Publishing content is fun. Creating the content is fun. Editing the content is not as fun. So you can see while you're watching the source monitor, sometimes I'll reach up and adjust the focus of my camera because my camera is not autofocus. I want to be able to choose what's in focus at any time. With my lens that I'm using, it's the Sigma 18-35. I'll link that down in the video description. And the GH4 has something really cool called focus peaking, and I talk a little bit about that in my studio setup tour of 2016. I will also link that in the video description. And all of that extra, that footage where I'm adjusting needs to be cut out. I am pretty lucky doing these cell phone repair videos that all of my lighting remains constant and the same. And so there's not a whole lot of color grading or lighting the screens that I end up doing. All of that is done in camera. I have my white balance set just with the computer inside of the camera internally. Adobe Premiere does have an effects panel where you can get in and do some color correction. If my white balance seems off, I can just jump into the fast color corrector, use the eyedropper, and click on the background. It'll automatically correct that to white. But since my camera does a pretty good job with the white balance, I don't need to use that very often. Inside of the effects panel as well, if you're doing color correction, you can also brighten it, sharpen it. There's anything that you can do with your Instagram, you can also do with Adobe Premiere. Change things to black and white. Luckily, with my line of work, I don't need to work with that stuff too much, which helps streamline the process. So this screen record that I'm doing right now is on my desktop PC, which is a pretty powerful machine. I'll show you the specs of that at the end as we do the render section. But my laptop, which is actually what I'm doing this voiceover and this particular video on of how to edit, isn't as powerful because it's a laptop. And so if I need to, I can jump in on the source panel and the program panel, which is the center and the top right, and I can drop those resolutions down from full to half. So I can edit 4K footage on my laptop, but since my laptop screen is 1080p, it doesn't need to be displaying 4K because that's just not possible. So if I drop it down to half, it uses less of my computer's resources to display the image as I'm editing. So keep that in mind if your computer is not the most powerful. You can still work with powerful footage using Adobe Premiere. Just drop the resolution down while you're working with it. And then when you render it, you can render it out at full quality. Not a problem. The lower you drop your resolution, the less choppy the playback will be. So now you can see I am reassembling the phone. I did a couple videos way back when I started, my first 30 or 40 videos. Some of them I didn't put back together again, and people started complaining about that a little bit because reassembling the phone is half the process. So I make sure to include that part of the video in all of my videos, in the future, because my whole premise about being a YouTuber is to make life easier for other people when they're attempting repairs of their own. I'm an environmentally friendly guy. I enjoy, not wasting things. And so when people throw away a phone that still has value or that they could have sold for money, like that kind of stresses me out a little bit inside. And so it's important, the easier I make the repair for people, the more likely they are to do it themselves, which, makes the world a better place in general. Less phones end up in landfills, global warming slows down. Basically, by repairing your cell phone, you stop global warming. It's as simple as that. So what you saw me do right there is I took that same arrow title that I used before, and I went to the top left corner of that title panel, and I did new title based off of current title, which basically just duplicated those arrows, so I didn't have to redo them all, and I just dragged and dropped that back into my timeline with the new title. So basically I have two identical title screens, and I can adjust them independently of each other without, disrupting the first one. It just makes life a lot easier, and it's a little trick that you can use when you have titles that are similar to each other and you don't want to create the new one from scratch. You can either use a template, or you can do that button I just showed you, which is create a new title based off of the current title. Each time I finish scrubbing through a clip and getting the pieces that I need, I can just drop down into that bottom project window where all of my little clips are, and I can just double click and then start a new clip in the source window and repeat the same process over and over again until all of my clips are used up and I've gotten all the important footage that I need out of each of them. So right now it looks like I have successfully put the phone back together again, and the phone is functioning. That's always a good sign. So I'm going to take my screen and I'm going to work on I don't normally do this, but in this particular video I lined up the phone and the tools to make a thumbnail, because it's always hard to get an interesting thumbnail from a teardown video. Sometimes with my durability videos I can get a good thumb, or like an explosion video where I was working with airbags or something. There's always a good thumbnail you can use with that. But in this thumbnail for this particular video, I staged it, which is obviously fine. I'll make another video about how I edit my thumbnails later, making the background white and everything in Photoshop. This particular video I'm just going to be talking about video editing. So I did take a screenshot with Adobe Premiere of that tile right there, my source monitor, and I saved that in the same folder and the same SSD that all my program files are on, to kind of keep that organized. So the rough edit is now complete. I have all of the little tiny clips that I want from my footage. I have about 30 minutes worth of footage, and I've taken all the important bits out of that and stuck them into my timeline. And during this whole time, during the teardown itself and this rough edit, I've had these ideas coming into my mind of what I want to say during the actual video, how I want to explain things, any stupid jokes that come to my mind. I don't actually wing that for the most part during my voiceover. So I have this little script that I set up. In this video, the LG G5, I didn't have a whole lot of ideas coming to me during the process, so I'm pretty much going to write the script from scratch as you see it right now. So I'm going to rewatch the video from the beginning and just explain, word for word what is going on during the video. This goes back once again to just making the videos as short and to the point as possible. When I first started making YouTube videos, I would go and, I was repairing cell phones before I was a YouTuber. And I would go and watch a YouTube video on how to repair a certain cell phone, back when there was, 8 screws and it was relatively simple to take apart. And these videos would be like 30 minutes long or 40 minutes long, and I'd have to scroll through them and find the most important parts, and these people would be talking about their lives forever and ever and ever. And it's like, whoa, dude, I don't want to see your dog. I just want to see how to repair this cell phone. So I make it a point in my videos to be as to the point and concise as possible. And no one wants to hear about my life. They just want to see, their phone fixed. And I feel like that's pretty important for, any do-it-yourself video. So by creating this script, there's not a whole lot of, ums and repeating myself over and over again. Kind of like what I'm doing right now with this particular voiceover, because I don't really have a script. I'm just kind of explaining things as I go along. So I hope you have your popcorn or your cereal or whatever you're doing, because, yeah. Anyway, back to the important stuff. In some professions, there's always this general idea that you don't want to share your secrets with the rest of the world because, it'll hurt your chances of success. But really with YouTube, it's the exact opposite. You actually get more from the system as you share more with the system. It would always bug me when I would go to college and see, I'd be paying thousands and thousands of dollars to go to my college classes. I actually graduated in business, but I would go to class and my teachers would pull up a YouTube video to explain the subject that I was paying them to be teaching me. And, obviously the YouTube video explained it better than they could. And so it was good for them to use, the best resource available, but it was annoying because, I can go find that video myself. I'm pretty good at Googling things. It's just like, why am I paying my professors thousands of dollars to be teaching something that I can learn for free on YouTube? So I'm pretty stoked to be part of this super awesome free system, which is YouTube, that benefits the world on so many levels. The more I can contribute, the more I get back from it. So it's a win-win for everybody. Plus, I've literally talked to about 1,000 people about starting their own YouTube channels, and maybe one or two has actually started one and been serious about it. Most people don't realize how much work and effort goes into making YouTube videos and how much time it takes out of their day. And so they'll quit, after the first couple videos. But in reality, being a YouTuber is actually a pretty awesome job. And you really do make time for what you want most in life. So if you want to become a YouTuber, you can. You just have to spend the time and, the hours to do it. And there is an incredible amount of time and hours required. Most of them is sitting here editing videos like this. So a couple more things I can mention as we're finishing up writing this script. The camera mount that I use, the tripod, I mentioned it in my 2016 setup tour video, which I will link in the video description, is actually a tripod that the legs extend, and there's no bracket holding the legs together, so I can make them as wide as possible. And the camera, the Panasonic GH4 that I'm using, is actually attached underneath the tripod. So the legs are spread and the tripod's facing straight down onto my desk. The camera is facing straight down onto my desk. The white background you see is just a white piece of paper, and it's a wooden desk that I'm working on so that it won't bend or flex as I'm using my screwdriver or prying on the screen at all, which, was a problem I had when I used a plastic desk in the past. One of those Walmart desks that you get. Those flexed and it made the video quality not as good. I also used a camera with autofocus previously, and that would get annoying for people watching the video as well, where it would be constantly going in and out of focus. Basically, I don't improve my video quality until I start getting complaints about different things. And I'll mention that as I go along. I didn't go to school for video editing or anything. All of this stuff I learned on my own or by watching YouTube videos, like Ben Brown's or the Linus Tech Tips or any of Adobe's free videos that they have online as well. Basically, if you have any question about anything and you know how to word it, you can find the answer to it. A lot of learning how to do video editing is learning the vernacular, which words like what scrubbing means, what editing, all the terminology used for editing. So I'll try to use those same words as I do this video. So now that I've completely watched the video and I've written the script for the entire video, I'm going to go through and read it just one more time. Obviously, speed is an issue in trying to get these videos up. I don't want to spend too much time, reworking something over and over and over again. It's better to get content out that's slightly imperfect than spend an extraordinary amount of hours trying to make it perfect. Time is money, and you don't want to fret over the little tiny things. Plus, my voiceover isn't going to be perfect at the end anyway. The script is more of just like a general idea of what I'm going to say. It's also important for the closed captions because part of Google's system, how it scans your videos, obviously the Google algorithm has no idea what is inside a video. So it's really, really important that you try to do closed captions whenever possible. Not only does it help the people who can't hear, they can read your video, but it also helps Google's algorithm so it knows what's inside of the video and it can rank it accordingly. So if you want your videos to rank higher, do the CC or the closed captions for your video. Some of my videos are shot live, so I don't have a script written up for it. Not my teardowns or my durability tests, but like other videos, like when I worked with Brian's Mobile 1, the guy who got me started with YouTube 4 years ago, and we exploded some airbags. That video was shot live. So in that case, when I don't have a script, I'll have my older sister transcribe the video for me after it's done. And so she's actually transcribing this video because I don't have a script for this one either. And I apologize profusely for it being so long and boring. But huge shout out to her. Even though she doesn't repair cell phones, she is fantastic at transcribing. And I appreciate it because it helps people who can't hear, like I mentioned before, and it helps the video rank higher because Google actually knows what's inside of it due to those subtitles. So now that I've proofread my script and made any slight adjustments that I want, I'm going to jump into the actual voiceover itself. Now the mic that I use is called the Samson Meteor Mic, and I will link that down in the video description. This is the same mic that I used to record the voiceover on the LG G5 video, as well as the sound that you're hearing right now on this how to edit video. I usually have 4 monitors spread out in front of me. So I have the script on one monitor, I'll have the source monitor on a different screen, and I'll have, my main video editing on a third screen, and then I'll have like a research screen on my 4th monitor. So everything, spread out in front of me does help considerably. But as you can see, it also works just fine on one screen. It's just more consolidated. So you don't need a huge studio to get started. When I started my YouTube channel, I was recording everything with a cell phone, which is like the old Evo 4G way back in the day that only recorded at 720. And then I was editing on a laptop. So my first 50 videos or so are shot with a cell phone and edited with a laptop. And even now, I have a nicer laptop, but still some of my videos are shot with a cell phone. I see so many YouTubers who are like, oh, I need this nice camera before I can get started, or I need a really nice computer before I get started. And like, those are the dreams. Obviously everyone who wants to start a business wants these nice things in order to run their business, but these nice things are not a prerequisite to running your business. You need content before you need things to run the YouTube channel. You should start your YouTube channel with what you have, and then let your YouTube channel pay for the nicer equipment. Once you've proved that you have content worth watching, then you can spend it on the extra toys. Okay, so jumping into the voiceover itself, I'm going to mute that first track just by hitting the little M button, and then I'm going to hit the microphone button, which will start the recording. Now I usually have this script on a different screen, but for the purposes of this video, so you can see everything, I'm going to drop it down in front of the program monitor and the Adobe program so you can see what's going on. So I'm reading through the script right now, just word for word, and then adding anything that I, come up with off the top of my head as I'm reading it. It's not super important to line this up with the video just yet. I'll be doing that all with the editing process after the recording is done. While recording all of this, there is going to be quite a few mistakes, but I can always edit those out later on when I streamline the video and drop it down. You can see that the video currently is about 5.5 minutes, and I'm going to shorten it down quite a bit after I get my voiceover finished. One thing that I like to do is I don't want to destroy any of the original footage. So you see that the original footage has, its video timeline and it has its audio timeline. I'm leaving that audio timeline there just in case I want to use any of the screwdriver sounds or the unclipping sounds, or any of the sounds, of the phone breaking during my durability test. So I leave that intact, and I make sure to do the voiceover, the recording in that second audio stream so that the original audio doesn't get damaged. It's always nice to keep the original. Never destroy something that you might need later, especially since it's so easy to keep it intact the first time around. Okay, so you can see that the voiceover is now done. You can see all the little audio peaks and the spaces between the audios where I've taken a breath or I've paused for a second during the voiceover. And I'm going to edit all of these out to streamline things. So I'm going to press the C button, which pulls out my razor tool, and I can just clip the audio wherever I want to, and then drag and drop it to delete segments. As I jump in, so for this video, I am going to use my original audio. So I'm going to jump into the audio track mixer and go to my first track and drop that down a few decibels, usually about 4 to 6, depending on the video. That way the video from my camera, the Panasonic GH4, is going to be less prominent than the audio from my Samsung, the voiceover mic. So people can still hear the sound of the screwdriver and the phone moving around, but my voiceover will be way more prominent. So I'm still using this C button, which is the cut or the razor tool, and I'm using that to cut out all of these extra spaces. Remember, YouTube has a very, very short attention span, usually about 3 to 5 minutes for my type of video. So I'm going to cut out all of the extra junk so they don't have to sit through that. Watch time is also very important for YouTube's algorithm lately. So if a person is watching my video and they only watch 20% of it, YouTube is going to think my video is not very important. So if I make my videos short and consolidated and important to watch the whole thing, people end up watching 60 or 70%. And a good watch time, is obviously greater than 50. So the more I can get people watching my video, the better. That's why I only leave in the important things. During the rough edit, I took out all the parts that I thought I might need for the final edit. And now that we're doing the final edit, since the voiceover's done, I can shorten the video down quite a bit. So this is the intro section of my video. So I'm going to shorten it to the clips that I want. Just right-clicking and then clearing. You can also use the delete key to delete anything you want. Now this is the intro. I'm going to do a video specifically on intros here in the next week or so on how I make a video intro like this. And you can too for your YouTube videos in the future. This one's at 1080p, so I'm going to right-click and scale to frame. So it fills up the entire 4K sequence that I set at the beginning of this video. Now if I hit Alt, I can drag the video side of the clip down and leave the audio intact, because the audio actually goes longer than what I want the video to be. There's a little bit of black screen that I got rid of there. I'm also going to drop down the audio of that intro because some people were complaining that it was too loud. Drop it down 4 decibels or so. And you can do that on the actual audio clip itself just by dragging down, or on the left side in the effects panel as well. You can drag that, and I'll show you how to do that in a minute. So now this part of it is going to be a lot of rewatching the clips that I'm editing just to make sure that things flow smoothly and I have the clips in place that I want. I'm going to be scrolling in and out of the timeline with my scroll wheel, but you can also use the plus and minus buttons up on the top of your keyboard above the letters. This is different than the numpad. Those keys, the plus and minus, don't work. You have to use the plus and minus above the keyboard itself. Also, during this voiceover, you can hear the sound that my lips make when I talk. I had someone complain about that as well, and so I usually clip those out, during sentences. It happens to every YouTuber during, when you're recording on a mic, even on the super nice mics. I'm using a relatively nice mic. I believe it costs like 60, 50, I don't know. It costs like $60 maybe. So it's not a $1,000 mic, but it sounds pretty good. Even the $1,000 mics don't cut out all of the unwanted sounds. So you can see a little peak right there. So I'm just going to drag the clip over and hide that peak and hide the breath that I took right there as well. People lose interest when you take breaths, so I'm going to get rid of all of the unnecessary ones. And these parts are ones where I stuttered or said something wrong, or I didn't like the tone of my voice when I said it, so I just reset it, and then I can click and drag and just erase the clip that I messed up on. If you've ever wondered why YouTubers always say, leave a comment or like and subscribe, all of that stuff, it's because viewers don't remember to do those things. So right now I'm explaining that they can find the toolkits in the video description. Because in the video description, there's a lot of ways YouTubers make money, whether it's through affiliate marketing or selling their own products. I send people to the description so they can find the products that I'm using in my videos. And at the end of the video, I'll always tell them to like and subscribe, or I'll mention it throughout the video so they don't forget. Even me, I'm a professional YouTuber, and I don't like the videos that I enjoy on YouTube, unless I get reminded sometimes. So it's always good practice to slip it in there. Not excessively, but when it makes sense. So to streamline this video, a lot of the times I'll just cut the clips like I used with that C button. I can also right click and adjust the speed of the clip. So right click, speed, duration. Sometimes I'll do 150%, sometimes 200%. Rarely will I go up above that because it starts to get choppy with the footage. And so 150, 200% is about as fast as looks good on my computer screen and in my opinion. So you can also right click in between clips and do a ripple delete, which just gets rid of the blank space between clips. And also on the timeline, I have that little snap icon clicked, which means that as I'm drag and dropping these clips, it'll automatically snap to the clip that's closest to it, so it won't, overwrite it or leave a little bit of black space or blank space in between them. It's always annoying when you render your final clip and you find like 2 seconds of blank space in between two clips and you have to go redo the whole thing because the snap wasn't enabled and the clips weren't butted right up next to each other. So there's two ways of listening. I can just hit that play button and play it and listen to it naturally, or I can speed it up with that L button. The more I press the L button, the faster it'll play forward. The more I press the J button, the faster it'll play backward. Or I can also just click that little blue icon and drag it. It's called scrubbing through the timeline, and I can listen to it. There's a ton of preferences and stuff you can set up. Like if you go to edit and preferences, you can get rid of the sound that it makes while you're scrubbing, but I actually really enjoy that. I can hear it very quickly and get all the information that I need. It's also very important to brand your videos. At the end of this video, I will show that I drop a watermark into the bottom left corner of JerryRigEverything. It's weird, but I have a lot of people stealing my teardown videos. Now, I'm not sure why someone would want to steal a very boring teardown technical video like this, but it happens a lot. And so with that watermark, it's very easy for people to notice that it's my video and come and tell me, because I don't always see them first. I usually have someone shout out to me on Twitter or send me an email saying, hey, this guy stole your video. And YouTube is incredibly good about giving credit to the person who posted the video first. So I'll get in there and file a copyright claim, and it's usually taken down within 1 or 2 hours. Not a big deal at all. The filing a copyright claim only takes a couple minutes, hardly 3 minutes. You just have to link the offending video and your own video, and you can even file multiple complaints in the same complaint form. So huge shout out to YouTube for making that an easy process for creators like myself. I really appreciate that. So there's probably a hotkey for changing the speed duration. I don't use it. I just find right-clicking and then going up for the speed duration is fast enough for me. In the speed duration box, there's also a clip that if you're changing the speed of multiple clips, it'll automatically shrink them all together, not leaving that black space in between them all. So you just have to find what works best for you in your workflow, whether you want to use a ton of hotkeys or if a mouse works just kind of like how I'm doing it on my computer. Like I mentioned before, I didn't go to school for any of this stuff. This is all stuff that I've learned from trial and error or from YouTube or Adobe's free videos on how to create content. You can really learn anything you want on YouTube. It's pretty incredible.
Having a phone without a headphone jack would be like having a president who doesn't believe in climate change. Completely illogical.
So for this clip, I did throw in a political Donald Trump joke, which happens every now and then. Donald Trump is an easy guy to make fun of. And so I just grabbed a little PNG file off of Google image search, and then I can drop that down into my playlist just like you would with a title. Take that title image and drag and drop it right down into my timeline. There's a whole huge controversy over like the fair use and stuff like that. I haven't had any problems with using still images like that. I just make sure that if there is a watermark or branding on the picture, I leave that intact when I post it into my video. Or if the website has specifically stated that they want credit for their picture, or if they want or if they don't want you to use their picture at all, obviously respect that. But as long as you're not claiming someone's creation as your own, fair use usually is pretty fair. So I'm still using my mouse wheel a ton while I'm editing this timeline. I'll hold down that Alt key and scroll in with my mouse and scroll out with my mouse to focus on these little tiny intricate details that I'm adjusting. When I drag and drop that timeline to eliminate a breath, I'm usually just eliminating like a split second or two. Now these don't seem important if I'm just talking about them, but in a video where a YouTuber's attention span is so short, these are very, very important. And that's why you'll see some of the most popular YouTubers doing these jump cuts to, where they cut out all of their breaths to keep people's attention longer. One of the best ways to learn how to YouTube is just to, not copy the guys who are on top. Not copy them as in like their channel and, their videos word for word, but their style, like their editing. Figure out how they do their cuts and their zooms and, all of these different little tiny things that most people wouldn't notice unless you're in the actual business. And I'll explain some of that as we go along. So you can see that I'm using my mouse to start and stop the timeline a lot, and I'm dragging it all along the screen. And this is actually probably pretty bad practice. It's slowing me down the more I use my mouse. If I was able to use more keyboard shortcuts, it would speed things up considerably. Now, if you jump it up into the edit, you can scroll all the way down and see a list of shortcuts that Adobe has. And I would recommend learning those as you're beginning and using them because it'll speed you up later on. I wish I used more keyboard shortcuts, and I'll probably try to focus on using them more in the future. But this video right here is just showing how I, edit now. I could technically be using the spacebar button to start and stop the video as it's playing. I think it's because I'm, just using my mouse to drag and drop so many clips. My mouse is already, in motion, so I use that just to start and stop them as well as I'm dragging and cutting things all over the place. The way I got my timeline to look the way it is, you see the audio graphs and you can see the peaks and the low points. I just hovered my mouse over that left side and used my scroll wheel to expand that particular section of the timeline. Whether it's the audio or the video, if you expand it, you can see more detail. And this helps a lot when I'm using that audio timeline to splice different mistakes that I've made together. Like let's say I start saying a sentence and I stop halfway through and repeat that same sentence over again. I can take the correct part of that and splice in the corrected part of that into the correct part. And it makes it easier when I can see the actual timeline and what the features look like in the audio visually. So earlier in this video, I created that second title using the same title as the first one. It just kind of duplicated it and allowed me to create a second image of it. So I can edit the second one and it won't change anything on the first title. And that'll allow me to get the screw locations matched up to where I was as I reassembled the phone, since it's not going to be the exact same position as it was when I took the phone apart. So I need the arrows to be in a different spot. Anyway, so I'm dragging that second title into place during this second rough edit of the footage. I usually do the first edit, which you saw, where I get all the important bits out. The second edit, which I match it to the voiceover. And then the third edit is when I do like my zoom ins and my crops, and I make sure everything's streamlined and that I didn't miss anything. And then I'll usually watch it through a couple more times just to make sure that there's no mistakes, and then render it. And I'll walk you through all that stuff right now. And as you can see, I make a lot of mistakes when I do my first voiceover for the video, whether I don't like my, intonation as I'm recording, or if there's just different mistakes, different mispronunciations. There's a lot of editing that goes into the voiceover itself. And, that adds, a lot of time to the actual video editing process. If I was able to just record it live and post the video, it would take a lot less time than it does. But one of the reasons that I am the most watched and viewed cell phone repair channel on the internet is because I can take a lot of information and consolidate it into a couple minutes. So these extra couple hours that I spend editing my videos, they pay off in the long run. So for this final clip of the voiceover, I noticed this myself as I was watching it on my phone at one time, is that if I just stop the audio, it'll make kind of like a popping noise, and if it doesn't fade off, it's abrupt and people notice it. So I can set a keyframe right after the audio stops, and then I can drop the audio down gradually with a second keyframe at the end of the clip. And you can set the keyframes as you saw in my video just by clicking that little icon, and then moving the timeline a little bit farther on and setting the second keyframe, and that's how you do it there. What I'm doing right now is I'm setting the in-card screen. So the in-card is something that YouTube has recently started, and it only goes for the last 20 seconds of the video. So I'm going to make my in-card screen just those last 20 seconds. I added the it's free part because a lot of people on YouTube don't know that subscribing to a channel is free, especially someone who's only coming to YouTube to learn how to fix their phone. They're obviously not on YouTube a whole lot, not usually, sometimes they are. But they'll think that, oh, if I hit that subscribe button, it's going to charge me like a monthly fee or whatever. I found that I did get a large increase in subscribers once I started mentioning in the video that it doesn't cost anything to subscribe. So that's why I do that. And then I also do the shout out, with the Instagram, Snapchat, and Twitter. If I didn't mention, hey, follow me, I wouldn't have any followers over there on Instagram, Snapchat, and Twitter. Because people just, don't do anything or don't realize that you want it unless you tell them specifically that you want it. Communication is really important. I find that my subscribers and my followers are directly related to how many times I tell them to follow me and subscribe. So it is important. Now I did have a screen preset, a template preset for that title. This is my watermark in the corner. You can set the opacity of this watermark to whatever you want. Since my screen is white and my watermark is white and there is no border around the text, I leave my opacity at 100% because it just blends right into the white background anyway. It's not obstructive and it's not too large, but it is definitely there so people can find my video if it's ever stolen and come and tell me about it, which I super appreciate. So I locked that top bar. You can see the video timeline up there. I locked that so I can click and adjust anything below that, because if I click on the program monitor, it's going to only select the one screen that's on the top layer of it, which is the watermark. And so I'm mostly going to be adjusting the video and I don't want to touch the watermark, so since it's locked I can accomplish that. So in this particular run through of the video, I'm going to adjust the volume. So right there was something in my main audio footage from my Panasonic GH4 that I didn't want. So I just clipped it and then dropped the audio down all the way so it's out and people can't hear it anymore. I'm also going to be going through this footage and zooming in on things that I want to focus on or draw attention to or show. One thing I learned from the behind the scenes channel of Devin Supertramp is that you want to show something in a way that people haven't seen before, that makes it interesting to them. That's what keeps people around. And so I will zoom in on things because normally people don't see things that close up as they would with a 4K camera. Also, you see right here that I'm doing just a super quick zoom in on something. And you'll notice that a lot of huge YouTubers do this as well. It's when they want to emphasize something that they're saying, they'll crop in on themselves just ever so slightly. So I'll click on the frame and then go over to my left side on the master panel there where it's adjusting the clip, and I can adjust the scale. So if I'm doing just like a general zoom in, I'll usually jump in, like to 125 or so. But if I'm going to do a massive zoom in on something that I need to show specifically for a repair, I can go all the way to 300 or 400% since I'm working with 4K footage here. Zooming in super far with 4K footage, you don't lose very much image quality, which is awesome. And one of the main reasons why I have a 4K camera in the first place is purely for that zoom feature. Most people don't have 4K monitors to watch things on, but anyone can appreciate a good zoom. So after I've zoomed in, I can double click on the monitor, and since I have that top watermark locked, it's not going to move, and I can move just the screen underneath it. Or the layer underneath it is better said. Still using my Alt button and my mouse to scroll in to the timeline so I can see those little intricate details and the timeline sound that I'm zooming in on. Looks like my joke is placed correctly. Scrub through it a couple more times just to make sure. A lot of planning goes into these jokes. So I zoomed in about 300% on that one, and the image quality is still pretty darn good. A lot of these second, third, and fourth run-throughs is just a lot of watching to make sure that the timing is correct between the voiceover that I did and the original footage. The wide-angle lens does not have the optical stabilization. Because that's what video editing is. If you want to move the effects from one clip to another, like let's say I've cut a clip and I've zoomed in on half of the clip, but I want to zoom in and arrange the other half of the clip the same way, but I left the cut there in the center, you can just copy the attributes and then paste the attributes to the other one, or any of the other clips on the timeline that you need to. So right click, copy, and then right click, paste attributes, and that'll change the speed of the clip as well as the crop of the clip and the zoom of the clip. Any of the attributes that he had changed on the first one will then copy over to the rest of the clips.
Unless you have a micro soldering station and some major skills. I'll clip the cameras back into place, make sure you get them back into their
That's a good way to not have to change each clip individually. Now I'm going into that second title screen where I, just duplicated the first arrow screen, and I'm making sure all these arrows are lined up. Back to keeping people interested in your video, using those subtle crops. You'll find that a lot of big YouTubers use it when they're, making a joke or when they want to emphasize something. I notice MKBHD usually does it a couple times during his videos. It's super subtle, so you won't notice it unless you're actually paying attention to it. But as you watch his videos, watch for that. It'll be showing him just talking, and then it'll zoom in for just a couple seconds and then zoom back out, just a quarter of an inch or so, but it'll happen, and that keeps you interested subconsciously.
You won't need to go robbing hairdryers from little old ladies to open this phone up like you would a Samsung. Those are much more difficult to repair. Hit that thumbs up button if you like easily.
So we are reaching the end of my video. You can see the end card up there with the Instagram, Snapchat, and Twitter icons. Those are all PNG files, which means they have a clear background, which is nice. Also, side note, if you use that Snapchat icon on your Snapchat, it'll actually direct you straight to my Snapchat. So it's specifically designed for my my Snapchat. So now that I've done the third walkthrough, which is just kind of, taking all of the little different clips and setting those, doing the zooms and making sure that it all flows smoothly, I'll usually watch it, a couple more times just to make sure that there's no other mistakes or errors and everything is the way that I want it to be. And then I can move into the actual exporting of the file and uploading it to YouTube, which is a whole new ballgame all by itself. It is always a good idea to save your project a ton of times as you're, working on it. Also set your auto saves to, every 15 or 20 minutes just in case something bad happens to you during your project. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to export this right now. I'm going to click on the little file name right there, the little part in blue, and then I can save it as whatever I want to. This is how you get your video, stitched together into a viewable format for YouTube. So I'm just going to name it the LGV20 Teardown. Oh, I think I called this the LGG5 a couple times during this video. Oh well, LGV20 is what I meant to say. And so I'm going to save it as that. And then as far as the export settings goes, I'm going to do the H.264, which is what YouTube prefers. And this match source high bitrate crap is a big mistake on Adobe's part, because this high bitrate is only rendering it at 10 megabits per second, which is completely way too low for what YouTube uses. So I'm going to take this and adjust it up because my camera is shooting at 4K 100 megabits per second, and this is just something I pulled off of Google's website talking about what bitrate your footage should be as you upload it. So if you're doing 1080p, you should be at 8 megabits a second, or 12 if you're using those higher frame rates. And if you're doing 4K, there's no way you should ever upload something at 10 megabits per second. You need it to be, the minimum that I would ever do is 50, but since my camera is doing 100, I might as well render it at that. The way that the H.264 is like encoded though, it'll end up being about 80 megabits per second, and that's just how H.264 converts the image into H.264. And I'll probably make a video about that in the future, but it is very important. So rendering at maximum depth is talking about the color, whether it's 8-bit or 10-bit. Most monitors can only do 8-bit, so you don't need to worry about the 10-bit or rendering at maximum depth. And then the maximum quality or maximum render quality is talking about blending frames together, and that's important if you're doing a lot of special effects, but since I don't do a lot of special effects, I'm going to leave that unchecked. So yeah, I think that hits all of the exporting settings. When I I learned about bitrate and stuff when I was doing my Nexus 6P video, and a lot of people were complaining that they couldn't see the Nexus 6P logo on the back of the phone when they were watching at 720p or lower. And that's because of YouTube's compression. Since I uploaded that at 10 megabits per second, that particular camera I was using was 50 megabits a second. I was losing out on a bunch of that quality, and YouTube was just crushing the video at 10 megabits per second, and people weren't able to see the detail anymore unless they were watching at 1080p, which is extremely frustrating. So from then on, I made sure to use the higher bitrate on every single one of my videos. And so if you want your videos to look crisp or clear, use the higher bitrate when exporting at H.264. So my computer at home is a beast, this desktop. Because I'm rendering at that higher bitrate, it's using less of my CPU during the render. If I was using a low bitrate, my computer CPU would be thinking a lot more about the transcoding process. I'm not sure why it does this. This is something that Adobe, has their own issues with. But, it is still pretty fast. And I usually use the Adobe Media Encoder instead of using Adobe Premiere to encode it. And that just frees up the Adobe Premiere, so I can use that when I'm setting up my thumbnail. I can do my screenshots and everything. Devin Supertramp has some good behind-the-scenes stuff. And the Linus Tech Tips video that I mentioned earlier also is fantastic, as well as Ben Brown has a How I Edit My Videos. And I'll link all of those at the end of this video. And, if you have any tips for me, also leave those in the comments, and, because that'll help out other people as well, not only myself. And YouTube is a fantastic platform for sharing tips and tricks, and that's the way, education is going. You can learn everything you could possibly want to for free online, and that's the way it should be. So hopefully you enjoyed this. Thanks a ton for watching, and I will see you around.